Hello, my name's Jill Bailey and I work with Helen Sanderson Associates. This webinar will share an overview of our experiences from working with residential care homes across the UK, where we've aimed to develop with homes the most personalised approach from moving into a nursing or residential care home onwards. Let's start with a very brief history. The fundamental person-centred thinking skill is to be able to separate what's important to someone from what's important for them. The things that are important to us are about what really matters to us, the things that increase well-being and make us happy, content and fulfilled. Important for is about the help or support we need to stay healthy, safe and well. So what we're seeking is a balance so as people have the things that are important to them present in their lives, whilst also staying healthy, safe and well. Historically, what we know is that services pay great attention to what's important for people, whilst what's important to them may be largely ignored or seen as something to be done if we have enough time or enough staff. Personalisation brings this back into balance. People are the experts in their own lives, and we must know and pay attention to what matters to people and deliver support in the context of how people want to live. It's the soul of our work and brings us back to a solid values base. We're talking about supporting an ordinary way of living your life that may give people a reason for getting up in the morning, and it includes pleasure and purpose. It also gets us moving away from care plan tick boxes that sometimes focus more on a person's physical needs without also paying good attention to learning what matters to people. There are great care plans too that may include information about what matters to people, but often that information is dispersed throughout the plan, scattered amongst clinical information and medical information, assessments and reports, and those pieces of information can really get lost amidst all the other information. Also, life stories have very good information about what the person has done in the past, but doing a life story doesn't replace detailed knowledge about what's important to somebody now. So let's start off with a question. Can we deliver personalised support if we don't know what matters to people and what best support looks like from their perspective? I don't believe that we can. Personalisation starts with the person knowing who they are, what matters to them, and how they want to be supported. Which means that a great place to start with this is a one-page profile. It has 3 sections: an appreciation section about your qualities, what's important to you, and what good support looks like to you. The 3 questions described that form the one-page profile look deceptively simple, but experience tells us that asking these questions directly rarely works. Seeing a one-page profile as a new form to fill out and just asking people or their relatives what's important to you and how do you want to be supported is unlikely to lead to the rich information that we need. This information has to be drawn out through conversation, learning about people in different ways, and a one-page profile is simply a way to structure how we record this information. So it's very much the record of a conversation, and we would always avoid it becoming another service form to fill in. This is one of my favourite quotes from a woman I admire greatly called Nancy Kline. And she says, "Every day the world pulls us down, shakes us up, slices into us, laughs at our attempts and belittles our triumphs. We need to hear afresh every day a few things that are honestly good about us." And that's why it's so important that one-page profiles begin with appreciations. So people hear about what others like and admire about them, and what we appreciate about somebody can be a starting point for staff, and sometimes relatives too, to taking a step back and seeing who that person is and appreciating their qualities and strengths. And this helps counter our tendency to focus on what's wrong or how much support the person needs. Let me tell you how it happened for Winifred. Despite always being warm and generous, Winifred hasn't always been as content as she looks here. Winifred lives with 44 other people who also live with dementia. And when I first met Winifred, she was at the locked gates of the home, crying on her knees, searching for her daughters. Staff said she was often distressed and unsettled. In this more recent photo, her well-being's clear to see as she washes up in the kitchen. The approaches that we introduced have made a real difference to Winifred's lived experience. And I want to share in this webinar how some of this came about and the approaches that we used. Personalisation means people having choice and control over their lives and services. It means designing the supports in the context of what matters to people. Because we've said that we cannot deliver personalised support if we don't know what matters to a person and what good support looks like from their perspective. So personalisation is about a shift in power. It's a different way to listen to people, a different way to work together and think about what's going to work for the person, not just keeping people safe with professionals in charge. So we meet with the person and those who know them best to find out what matters to people and how they want to be supported. Winifred's daughters, Maureen and Bernie, came to her meeting, and a team member who knew Winifred well. It was a very different kind of meeting. Winifred was able to contribute in her own way as much as she could. And there were conversations about what made a good day and what made a bad day for Winifred, what was working and what wasn't working for her. And from those conversations, there was enough information to begin to inform the one-page profile. Asking different questions led to different conversations that led to a thorough understanding about what mattered to Winifred and how she wants to be supported. And this is the information we need to ensure that a person's support is tailored to their needs and aspirations. And that is the very bedrock of personalisation. This is Winifred's one-page profile, and you get a real essence of who she is. Without this information, people are more likely to be treated as a clinical condition, and their frailty or dementia will always be seen first. As I've said, this isn't simply a form to be filled in. This information has to be drawn out through conversation, learning about people in different ways, which is why the conversations with the person and their allies are crucial. And a one-page profile is simply a way to structure how we record that information. This is now part of the job description for all staff who work with Winifred, and it helps ensure that these things that matter to her are present on a day-to-day basis and that she's consistently supported in a way that makes sense to her, even if there are lots of different staff involved in her support. And we can do this with everybody, regardless of whether people use words to speak or communicate typically, because we listen more carefully to what people are telling us in other ways, and also proactively working with families to capture the rich contribution that they have to make. At Winifred's meeting, we also explored what was working and what wasn't working, not just from Winifred's point of view, but from her daughter's perspective and from the perspective of Lisa, who was the manager of the home that Winifred lived in. This meant that we can clearly separate out whose issues are whose, and this also helps us to think about outcomes, because we get to the outcomes by changing what's not working. The purpose of the working, not working analysis is to inform action that will improve life for the person and for their allies. The conversation also provided information about how Winifred communicates, and this is recorded onto a communication chart. This is a way to make sure that everyone is consistently responding to how Winifred communicates. And if people are to have the things that matter to them present in their lives, we need to know how they're letting us know. We also look to the future during this meeting, thinking about hopes and aspiration by asking the if I could, I would question. So what we learned from Winifred, her family and the staff was that she was happiest when she was busy. She'd always been a wonderful homemaker, and what would make her happiest was being involved in the household chores within the home. We look to ensure that every person who lives in the home have 2 hours dedicated individual time to do something that they enjoy each month at a time that suits them, either in or outside of the home, with a team member they choose. 2 hours a month may not be a lot, but an inch gained is an inch worth living in. We've said that personalisation is about a shift in power, and that requires a change in relationships. And if person-centred practice requires a different way of listening to people we support, then creating a person-centred culture means extending this to staff as well. This meant that all staff at the nursing homes and care homes we work with, including housekeepers, kitchen staff, maintenance staff, managers, support and activity workers, all produce their own one-page profiles. This process also helps leaders learn more about how staff show up in the lives of people they support. It's a big and very important question that we have to consider as good companions on life's journey, as co-creators of possibilities for engagement and contribution within community. And it also helps us identify the real stars in the staff team and those team members who may need further support in order to really get it. Continuing with Winifred's story, with the information that we gathered from the people living with Winifred at Bruce Lodge, the care home where they are, and the staff one-page profiles, Lisa, the home manager, was able to suggest a good match between how the person wanted to spend their individual time and a staff member who maybe shared that hobby or interest. Lisa matched Winifred with Beryl, who's the housekeeper at Bruce Lodge, and this is Beryl's one-page profile. Winifred's new relationship with Beryl, an extra responsibility, has had an extraordinary effect on her happiness and well-being. At home, she would routinely clean a house, so before this was identified as being important to her, a big part of her life and identity had been missing. But this has actually simply become the way Winifred spends her time, taking a role in looking after the household chores, and it's made a real difference to Winifred's lived experience. This is Win long after the housekeeper's gone home, sitting folding the laundry. The team have created an environment that says there are plenty of jobs to do. So we're talking about supporting an ordinary way of living your life, which includes pleasure and purpose. Our quality of life is absolutely determined by the presence or the absence of those things which are important to us. And so we have to take this into account when providing support. Winifred now has more control over how she lives her life and how she's supported on a day-to-day basis too, because staff look at a one-page profile in the way that they support her. Every service requires the daily recording of what happened during the day. As staff work with people, they're learning more about each person and how to support them well. And it's vital that this important learning is recorded, shared and used. Learning logs are a way to do this. Learning logs are what we use to learn how to make changes to better support a person. At Bruce Lodge, where Winifred lives, the staff use a learning log to record the person's individual time. After 4 or 5 learning logs have been filled in about a person, the senior looks at the information and uses it to update the person's one-page profile, as they're likely to be learning about what's important to the person and how best to support them. And it can also give additional information around how a person wants to be supported with regard to the care and support plans that identify what great support looks like around assessed need and those things that are important for people. The learning log has 4 columns, as you can see from Winifred's example here, and we're building on things that are working and looking at what needs to change or be done differently around what's not working. Sometimes this means we have to alter the information on the one-page profile or make adjustments to a person's care and support plans. So we're encouraging mindful workers who are conscious of their purpose to continually listen and learn from the people they support about what works well that we want to enhance and make sure it continues, and what needs to change or be done differently. So what did Winifred's family say about this? Here you can see what Maureen said, her daughter. Mum feels useful. She's been made to feel a useful member of the community instead of somebody who sits there and things are done to. She feels like she's more involved. People use their individual time in many different ways. Bessie used 1 hour a fortnight to have a pamper evening with a member of staff that she connected particularly well with. And sometimes bathrooms in residential care homes and nursing homes, due to all the equipment that we need, can be quite cold, sterile rooms. But the staff really made the effort to cover equipment that wasn't being used with throws, to use electric candles, to have music playing. And Bessie loved nothing more than a long soak in the bath. And that's actually helped to change the culture so that now when anybody is having a bath, that consciousness is there to really create an environment that works for the person. If you met May, she'd probably enjoy telling you about her years as an advertising executive and the huge ghastly advertising boards that she had put up around Stockport. She'd also tell you wonderful stories of the time she spent as commissioner of All Guide troops in South Stockport. So May's lived in a residential service with 43 other people since June 2010. She's in the early to middle stage experience of a dementia. And May and her key worker Paula thought about the if I could I would question, and this led to May using her 2 hours individual time to go out into the town centre and get her nails done, and to call at a wine bar on the way home. What was important to Mary was a Roman Catholic faith, but what wasn't working was that Mary hadn't been to Mass in a church for a number of years. So Mary was supported by a member of staff of the same faith, and they went to Mass together one Sunday every month. But of course, Mary began to connect with other people in the church community, and people would say, well, there's a coffee morning on Tuesday, we'll call for you, Mary. And now she began attending the church much more frequently and became a valued member of that community. Ken chose to use his 2 hours a time, his individual 2 hours each month, to go and watch the local football club. He'd been a professional footballer in his youth and thoroughly enjoyed it. So, as I say, there were many ways that people were able to enjoy individual time, but the key thing was their day-to-day experience within the homes was greatly improved the lived experience because there was a much greater awareness of what mattered to people. This is the format of a person-centred review, and it's the next step in the process. And this is where we ask family members to sit down with us, and it's a more formal way of ensuring that the information on the one-page profile stays updated. Hearing from everyone about what's working gives us an opportunity to acknowledge and appreciate what's going well, which can so often be overlooked, and looking at what's not working and understanding possible reasons for this is the first step to agreeing actions to change what's not working and improve the person's life. It's a bit like the first meeting Winifred and her two daughters came to with Lisa, the manager, and I, and we reviewed what was going well that we wanted to continue and what wasn't working that we needed to change. in relation to Winifred's one-page profile, her care and support plans, any risks, and how she was spending her individual time. We also added more information to a communication chart, and it seemed clear to us that Winifred wanted to continue with her individual time with Beryl. This is Winnie, who lives in another home in Oldham, and sometimes it's the small things that really matter. What Winnie told us was what wasn't working for her was the cup of tea and dry biscuit for supper. She said, I might be 104, but I enjoy my nip of whiskey and my tea and a wagon wheel at supper time. A small change that didn't cost money. It was simply about knowing. And this is Nora, who lives in the same home as Winnie. And Nora doesn't use words to speak, but she let us know that she'd like a little bit of whiskey too. And things kind of gather momentum. People see other things going on and let us know that they'd like some of that too. I think it's that idea that if people only know red and blue, how can they choose yellow, green, or a whole rainbow of colours? So that brings us to the end of a very quick overview of some of the approaches that we've been using in residential and nursing care and nursing homes. If you want any more information or have any questions, please do contact me. Thank you for listening.